Well, good afternoon, everybody. Here we are down in Southern California talking about our favorite subject. Tonight is really something a little special because it's one of those wine that the world loves, Americans especially. I was surprised when I heard a few years back that America was becoming the number one consumer of Brunello in the world. So what's Brunello? Brunello di Montalcino. It's a fantastic wine. It's a world classic wine. It's got its own magic. What I love about the Brunello is that Brunello Montalcino is one of those wines that is very hard to find that people don't like. Whether it would be a professional drinkers or just a novice, it's always the right note, the right spot. Brunello was already known around the 14th centuries, 1830, 1840. I wasn't there, so I'm imagining. There are records with Cosimo di Rodolfi, and he was appointed by the uh, Prime Minister of Tuscany during the Grand Duke Leopold. Going back to those times, agriculture was something really very much either serve the nobility or just to basically survive with your family. But the real story of Montalcino became quite a bit exciting and interesting around the 1800, 1865. The great winner and prize winner was actually the wine that eventually made the Brunello di Montalcino famous in the world and eventually become one of the force to reckon with when it comes to great wines, the Biondi Santi family. Biondi Santi family owned a beautiful property. In fact, the old man Clemente Santi owned a plot of Sangiovese Grosso, which is the grapes that makes Brunello. Brunello is made out of one grape, Sangiovese Grosso, and it won great recognitions, and eventually people paid quite a bit attention, and then eventually his grandson Ferrucci Biondi Santi, which is married into the Santi family, um, produced one of the most fantastic vintage, and in 1888, and then 1891, 1925, and 1945. We're going back some time here, which is why this wine is so loved, because it has a long-standing reputation. Uh, Montalcino is really interesting and exciting. On one hand, uh, it's just a bottle of wine, but on the other hand, is bringing distills basically the quintessential Tuscany hill village, a place where um, people, when they go on vacation, they really love. They want to live there. I have brought with me many wonderful clients and customers and friends, and that's the second things they say after. Say, I love this place. Oh, how can I stay here? How can I live here? It's like it's very easy. You call your lawyer, you you send some money. We'll find you a nice piece of land, and if we can find a nice piece of land, and then eventually the rest it's easy. However, you better keep your job because eventually it's a beautiful life, but it's an expensive life after all. So those emotions are real because one of the things that you'll immediately see when you get to this kind of area like Montalcino is this beautiful medieval town. Montalcino was no more, no less an outpost for the Siena. Siena was the major city, the capital of the area, in fact, the province. And Siena was where all the nobility, all the great palaces were. And of course, Siena is gorgeous, one of the greatest Duomo, black and white marble. It's mesmerizing. You walk in there, whether you're religious or not, you'll find that is absolutely beautiful. Also, Siena has given several pope. The whole area has given several pope to the Vatican. So there is a great legacy and history. But Montalcino, like most of the township around Siena, or even for that matter Florence, were basically the outpost, and they was basically under certain nobility, whether it would be a cousin archduke or some kind of count or whatever it was, some personality, basically a second, third cousin or someone married within the family of the leading family at the time. But it was an outpost. So basically, you're it's a this beautiful promontory like a cone in the middle of a valley, and it goes up and it goes around. Then you get to the top of the city, and you see a fortress like you see in the picture in my behind me. The fortress is basically Montalcino, and all around the mountain cone is a the village, and that's really the uniqueness when it comes down to it of the terroir, because being a cone in the middle of an area has a quite a bit differential in between the south, southwest, east, west, north, south, because it's not uniform slope. So you go into area of a Montalcino and you will have a totally different climate differential than you would if you go like south side or north side. That will definitely influence the way you drink the wine and the way this wine is produced. So even though the grape is actually Sangiovese Grosso, and Grosso in Italian means big. So a lot of time when you say Sangiovese Grosso, people huge imagine right away these big berries. It's not true. Grosso is referred to the fact that the Sangiovese has a very large at the mouth when you drink it of tannins. So that nice little peppery, dusty feeling that you have, that is make the wine feel really big, enormous actually. But the back end of it has got this nice voluptuous acidity with the fruit. So there is gives a really nice balance to the whole drinking experience. So Sangiovese Grosso got a particular name because the quality of the tannin improved the wine over time. So the first thing that was known for it was that the wine has a great edgeability. So that's the reason why I pointed out to you some of the historical vintages, because actually I had in my cellar 1968 and 1970, 75 were phenomenal. I mean, just spectacular. The wine never really died. It was still alive with a great acidity, wonderful drinkability. Of course, it thinned up, obviously, because that's the things that you do when you age the wine. You try to skin away from some of the roughness of the youth and the aggressiveness and the exuberance of a youthful tannins and acidity, but then you get in aromatics and soft, sweaty balance into the fruit, much more longevity into the palate. So when you drink, you feel the wine has this silkier, much more elongated flavors on the palate. Brunello is also a really interesting story because the township only had originally about 2-3 family that produce wine. Clearly, the Barbi and the Biondisanti, and so they had the ability and the economic possibility to produce wine on some kind of scale because it's not that big. If you fast forward today, the maximum number is around 200 plus producer. But the singularity is that the area of Montalcino has never been enlarged. So it's not an area, an AVA, or a vocation for viticulture. In the Brunello di Montalcino is very specific. The area is very delimited. And so if you think about it, you start with 3 people and end up with 200 plus people, clearly is one hell of a real estate business, because if you want to have a vineyards in Montalcino, you have to buy an existing one, which is incredibly expensive and most likely not available. One of the things that farmers over years and years, they realized that the value, the street value of this wine, and so they decided not to sell the grapes anymore, but actually make their own. So a large number of farmers, small vigneron, winemakers slash farmer, they became their own proprietary. And so slowly but surely, the number escalated, but the amount of acreage per wine company, it quite shrank it down. So when we really think about the total production of Brunello in the world, we really seriously, we're talking about 300 three, 400,000 case. That's not a lot of wine at all. There is a company here in the United States that they produce that alone. There are a company in Australia, they produce 10 times that. I mean, so if in a great scheme of a thing, this is a very much a boutique wine and remain, even with 200 plus producer, but the total amount of production is still the same. In fact, one can argue that it's an incredible popular wine for the amount of wine available around the world, especially because a lot of the production comes here into the United States. Americans definitely love Brunello. I even in the worst of times, I used to call Brunello the recession-proof wine because even during the recession, still there was the number one wine that we sold in a restaurant, and that's just because we was Italians. Just I asked my colleague in wine shops, and the same thing. Obviously, the two wine they sold the most was always Brunello first and Barolo second, but Barolo was more because the schwang and the publicity, but Brunello is the kind of wine that you didn't have to push it. It's one of those wines you have in the list and people automatically, they might have one brand favor versus the other brand favor, but it's a wine that people immediately recognize and love and order. And the other beauty of Brunello, for the amount of limitedness of productions and the high standard of quality, it's really not an expensive wine. I mean, in a great scheme of things, when we're talking about some of the top wine in the world, I mean, you can easily, and I mean it, buy a great bottle of Brunello for lower than $60. You can buy a bottle of Rosso, which is a young style or ready-made, fresh consumption, Rosso di Montalcino, for $15, $25, $30. So for a very serious area production in the world, a very famous area production in the world, those are numbers that are really for everyone. And I like that. I think more often we lose sight what wine was made for. Wine is really primarily made to drink, to enjoy. I know that sometimes we like legend and myth more than we like drinking, but in reality, wine is the single most popular drink among the Mediterranean people. Obviously, if you go to Nordic, they don't grow a lot of grapes, so beer is number one. But among us, the Mediterranean people, wine is almost in everybody's tables every day of the week. I mean, there's no particular reason why you need a glass of wine. Seriously, you really don't. And also because it's a wonderful civilized way of communicating, enjoy the company of people. So one of the stories that it really intrigued me in 2003, we had a a scandal in Italy, and Wine Spectator couldn't wait to jump on it and publish this article about in Italy they call Brunellopoli. You know, in Italy, everything scandals we have, it's opoly. It's like United States. Everything you got here is a gate, whether it be an Obama gate, Trump gate, Bush gate, Nixon gate. There's always some kind of gate. In Italy, we have opoly. Anything with an opoly ending is a scandal. So just like here, scandals are come and goes, and sometimes gossip, sometimes real. But this was a very dramatic because Brunello Montalcino enjoyed an incredible fame around the world, and we were all in because the wine was spectacular and people loved it. So around the years around from 1990 on, there was a very large amount of a sick fan about Brunello, especially among riders and American riders especially. I mean, the score were ridiculous. It were 97, 98, 100 points. It was almost like anybody made the wine in Brunello, in Montalcino, got a high score. So there was some issues inside of the country for sure, because I went back and forth many times, and I was friends with Soldera, the Mario Soldado's family, and Vincenzo Abruzzese, some of the producers in general. And there was rumbling about some older producer, older in the sense that more stylistically sincere and pure in making Brunello and basically using the techniques and the protocol that Brunello was always required. there was some rumbling about not happy because some of the more young, more aggressive producer were getting a huge score. And of course, this is an old adage, um, that is using different grapes. They using new barrels. They use whole barrels. Anyway, it was just a rumble. But actually, it became a problem because in 2003 there was a somebody report to the Italian authority because in Italy the AVA, where the area, the Montalcino, Brunello has a consortium. Consortium basically is a legal entity that regulates everything Brunello. And so there are very specific laws that protects the consumer from frauds. And one of them is you need about 100%, but real 100%, and not the other 100%, like 85, 12 something, to all that. It's 100% Sangiovese Grosso. And originally, they had to have 6 years in Slavoni Oak and then 1 or 2 years in a bottle and then get served. But in 93, they negotiated a new pact. So in 98, they were able to speed up the process because they want to be able to have a little younger, more fresher, more colorful wine that the old style of Brunello. So they all agreed and they came up with a new protocol, which was they could use a small barrique if they wanted to, and basically 2 to 4 years was the max. After that, years or two in bottles, and then off you go. So basically, you didn't have to wait 8 years for a regular bottle of Brunello. Well, the Italian government, basically the Brunello di Montalcino consortium, they shut down the operation. They say stop selling the wine because something is definitely wrong. Everybody's talking about it, and basically the accusation was that some producer or a lot of producers were using international grapes, basically Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah, whatever. And Wine Spectator wrote this big article. It was in a Wall Street Journal. The people talking. Of course, Italians can never help themselves. They love a good gossip. So it became the biggest thing because remember, also in Italy, you have a Barolo region, you have Sicily, you got Veneto. Every region compete for the same market, which is the American market. So they push more smoke up the chimney, so they make sure that there was even more chaos. And at the end, the 2003 was a joke because actually, after they finished with all the relevant testing and everything else, it wasn't true. What happened is basically there was in 1 or 2 producers, new producer, which not a lot of relevance to be honest with you. They were using some Malvasia Nera, some black Malvasia, which is giving more color to the wine. The reason, I don't know. They probably, because the American market tended to enjoy a deeper, darker color. They think the wine is bigger and better. Whatever the reason is a dumb reason because they should never put it in there. But the reality was that 2003 was a bad year. It was not a great year. So the wine was actually lighter and thinner regularly, which in many cases you serve it and drink it young, and you don't have to. You can ask for a little less money because it's much more enticing for a quick consumption. But so because they were used to the big score, they thought, hey, I'm not gonna, we're gonna get scored really bad on this one, and we don't want to lose, this wonderful escalation we go through, and so they made a couple bad decision. But the fact that they painted the whole city, the whole town, the whole industry as Brunellopoli, it was ridiculous. It was just absolutely ridiculous. However, time went by, people forgot, they move on. These things happens in a lot of places. This is actually one of the not that big of a deal kind of deal. There are uglier things in the wine business that one day we will discuss in a different frame. But all said it was basically they thought there was the Soldera family, that they were really upset because their vintage year, they got scored really bad for no reason at all, except because they're very classic, and they got an 88 point in one of the magazine. I think it was Spectator, or I don't know who it was. Not that I really care because I don't read them. They're all the same thing. You read the one and you read them all. So, and they got upset. They vent with the consortium, say, hey, it's not possible. We are the number one or number one and two producer in the nation, in the world, and yet we get treated like second-rate quality wine, where some so and so wine basically they don't even put all 100%. I'm sorry, Sangiovese Grosso, and they're getting this high score. But that's a totally different story. Sometimes people they get stuck in the mud basically because they don't really get how you get big score. They don't really understand sometimes the politics of things. It's a publisher. You have to publish every month. You have to every month you have to have something new to say. And sometimes you have the right importers and they buys a big advertising page. So you show up and before you know that where it should be 89, it's usually 92. And that's big difference. But after all that nonsense, because that's an Italian nonsense, to be honest with you, and it's a world of nonsense because nobody really care. People, they love Antinori, they're going to buy Antinori. People, they like Banfi, they'll buy Banfi. And it on a normal day, people don't open a bottle of wine and say, oh my God, what was the score on this wine? They usually buy and they put it away, they forget all about it, and then one day they pop it and say, hey, I got a great bottle of Brunello, let's drink it. And if you're the right company, please write me a note. Send me an email, massimonotre.com, and let me know when did you really notice the difference in between 92 points and 93 points. I like to find out because I'm really intrigued. And the reality is you didn't. So let's cut the nonsense. It's not like one is vinegar and the other one is sweet soda. It just, there are some differences. Obviously, 2003 was a teen year, so it was a cold year. It rained quite a bit. So the quality of the wine wasn't up to the standard that we're used to in the previous years because we had a slew of wonderful years. One can blame global warming for great wines. And as much as everybody wants to rag about global warming, you know what? In a cold weather area, the wine got better. They got more fruit. They taste more. So some classic taste, they complain. They go like, oh my God, it's not just the wine. It's like, yeah, shut up. Just drink it. Have fun. Stop. Really, don't be ridiculous. When is the last time you tasted that wine? The reality is every year's within the margin, wines are very similar if they use the same grapes. There are seasonal differences, obviously, we all know those. There's also winemaking difference. We know about those too. A winemaker can increment the coloring by do a much large and longer maceration on the skin. Also, you can add more tannins by using younger, more aggressive oak. Or you can use a neutral oak where you don't really get much of it. It just softened up a little bit and it gives some aeration to the wine with very gentle. So all those things put together is really about winemaking. And in the end, when you're talking about a one grape like Sangiovese Grosso, you really don't have tremendous difference. Now, where there is a difference is actually in the Brunello himself, because what you're going to find out very quickly, that Brunello is a cone, Montalcino is a cone, and so all around this cone there's a different temperature, different sunlight, different terroir, and so if you like your Brunello, they have a little more large mouthfeel. In other words, a little more fruit, a little softer tannin, a little longer acidity that is not very aggressive. So the southwest side is a better side because they get more sun. It's a much shallow, much lower hillside, so there is a much more even in a maturation of the fruit, and the fruit tend to be a little sweeter, a little more fruit forward. So this is really what comes down to some of the difference. On the north side, because they're getting more of the breeze from the mountain to Abetone, you get a more aggressive tannin, a little more firm acidity. The wine, it takes a little longer to mature, and some people love that. They like more the aggressivity of the wines. So if you're going to Sant'Antimo or you're going to Coldorcia, it tended to be a little somewhere in between. Also, you start finding a little more different soil formation because you're now on a lower level, a little further from the cone, which is the Montalcino, a little away from the rock, if you will. And then the soil becomes a little more giving, a little more frivolous. So therefore, it makes much more for a simpler, much easier wine to drink. Those are the right differences, and those are the differences that you will enjoy. I asked Vincenzo Abruzzese, the producer, the winemakers, and the owner of the Madonna del Piano, or and so I say, hey, why is your wine so intense? Why your wine is so, when it's young, it's such a stringent wine with the. Well, I say, we pretty much Val di Cava is the producer, obviously. Madonna del Piano is a single vineyard, which I really love. And he says one of the things that we did, we went completely biodynamic. And we noticed within 4 or 5 years into the agriculture change. But Montalcino always been natural, basically. But biodynamic is a little more intense. So they allow a lot of growth underneath the vines. It's supposed to look like wild area. And so you noticed that there was a change. The berry became even smaller, a little more intense. And along the way, the wine, the Sangiovese had a lot of more structure, a lot of more aggressivity. So they loved it. And they kept it. And in fact, they made that as a single vineyard, Madonna del Piano. Now, the original vineyards, they started all. It's the Greppo. The Greppo from Beyond di Santi is still there. The plot is beautiful, overlooking the Montalcino. It's right on a halfway up to the town, right south of the Barbi family, and you still can visit it. And when you see it, it's not much of anything, but the position is really beautiful. It's on a plateau. And that's where they discovered these particular grapes that everybody know today as a Sangiovese Grosso. But sometime along the way, they realized there's something, because people in town used to drink wine. So one must say, well, they drink Brunello. Yes, they did, but they didn't drink the Brunello they were aging for selling. They were actually drinking a young version of that Brunello. In fact, they call it baby Brunello, but actually it's not a baby Brunello. It's a young version. Baby, that means someday it's going to get old. The Rosso di Montalcino is never going to get a chance to get old because it's made it to be consumed right away. It's made it to enjoy right away. It's also wonderful with everything. So from appetites to pasta to meats, it's a nice, younger, fresh version of Brunello. So very easy to consume, and is of course a fraction of the cost. Although some producer, they make in Rosso that is just as expensive as someone else Brunello. And that is because, like I said, the property, the Brunello di Montalcino, the Montalcino region is so small. So when you have a small parcel and you have to satisfy your clients, they want actually the Rosso. You typically, at this point, you're actually using the same grapes that you use for Brunello. Like, I was looking at the price of a Salvioni, which is a great Brunello, by the way, but the Rosso costs just like a regular Brunello. And it's fantastic, for sure. But that's because Salvioni is very small. Production is very limited. And so for them to make the customer happy, they make a Rosso. That means they can drink it younger and fresher. But the cost is really enormous for them because they really have to get rid of some of the grapes. They otherwise will get into their regular Brunello. That makes sense. If you like the brand, if you like what they do, you'll enjoy it. Il Poggione is different. So Cannolicchio di Sopra is different. Everyone has a different approach. I like the idea that made Rosso di Montalcino what is today, which is very popular, very easy, approachable, affordable, is because you're drinking a particular grapes, varietal, from a very specific area, who has a particular DNA, which wonderful flavorants, and very high quality for moderate to inexpensive price. I like that. I think it's wonderful because it introduces you to an area, introduce you to a wine, introduce you to a grape, get familiarized with the grapes, with not much cost out of your pocket, and eventually the idea from there to go to a Brunello is very easy. Why Brunello? Brunello actually means darker. I used to have the kind of hair with the Brunello, but now as I became a Reserva, some some of the Brunello is gone. You got more of the white and gray, but that's a different story. We're not going to talk about that. So let's move on to the Brunello. Brunello means actually dark, or Bruno means darker or brown, and the reason is because it's a black grapes. And unfortunately, or fortunately, when we talk about grapes, we talk about white grapes. I never really seen a white grape, to be honest with you. I always seen a green grapes or a golden green grapes, a version of gold green grapes, straw color, but never white one. And neither I ever seen a really black one. In fact, the darkest I ever seen is actually Primitivo, but as you go closer, you see this beautiful dark reddish hue. However, our ancestor, they use a much more generic terminology. In fact, they don't say somebody's got a black hair. They say he's got dark brown hair, un Brunello. Un Brunello. That means it's a little darker. And so that's what the name came from. And of course, Brunello di Montalcino, from the town of Montalcino. By the way, my suggestion is to visit. It's absolutely beautiful. It's very romantic. They have very well organized. They got a great enoteca, which means it's a wine shop and a wine drinking, which you can taste. In Italy, they call miscelare. Miscelare means by the glass. So you can taste a very different producer from the different areas of Montalcino, and you get a wonderful sample of the area. Then, of course, they're going to serve you a bunch of crostini. You know what that is. Crostini, bruschette here in America. Crostini means a little hard toasted bread with anything on top. You can do chicken livers, they can do mushrooms, and depends on what season you're in. They have a different versions, all to accompany these wonderful wines. Very popular in the area. In fact, from Montalcino, when you look straight south, you will see the town of Montepulciano, which is very similar to Montalcino, but on a low altitude. In fact, Montalcino on the top is about 1,800 feet. On the bottom, it's 300 to the sea level, versus Montepulciano, I think, around the 700. So, but all in between, they are a wonderful field, and you know what they're really famous for. Everybody thinks they're famous for wine, but actually what they're famous for is the pecorino cheese, the Tuscan dolce pecorino cheese. It's famous all over the world, and in fact, the town in between Montepulciano and Montalcino, it's Pienza, the city of the Pope, and they're famous for their cheese. In fact, you see sheep everywhere. This is a very large sheep area with a lot of pasture, which is absolutely beautiful, all natural. And then, of course, when you go towards the Siena, you see a lot of the sunflower that you see in most pictures, and the beautiful hilltop, beautiful Siena from far away. It's a very, very romantic area. It's a very beautiful area. And like I said, the most people, first thing that they do when they get there, say, oh my God, I want to move here. And rightfully so. It's a very wonderful way of living. Also, they're known for something else in the area. A little south to that, there is the area of Maremma, very close. And so the Chianina cow, or the Vacca Chianina, the famous bistecca alla Fiorentina. So everybody knows about those things. The bistecca Fiorentina is basically a porthouse, a bone-to-bone, like the French will call entrecôte, in between the bones to bones, beef. But the Chianina cow is a very large white cow. It looks like a lot like the Texas Longhorn, and so very skinny from far away because it's very tall. So when you actually cut the short loin, you see this beautiful big eye, and the sirloin on the other side with the big bones, and they do it in an open fire, and then inside the oven where it gets the right temperature. It's absolutely delicious, especially rare, because that's when you get most of the flavor. The other thing that is incredibly popular, and absolutely the most popular thing, is the cinghiale, the wild boar. I mean, you cannot go to Siena and Montalcino in particular without having the pappardelle al cinghiale. It's even if you're vegetarian, please stop it. At least taste it. You're not going to die. You'll be fine. And believe me, you're not going to save anything. Those are wild. Those boar, they're really wild. They're everywhere. They go around and eat oak trees, berries, and they eat the chestnuts, and they devastate everything. So we have to control, and in between, instead of the true way, we use it. No, absolutely fantastic. They make great sausage. They make wonderful prosciutto. And, of course, the ragu of Walbor. How can you pass it with the Brunello? It's a marriage made in Montalcino, not in heaven, but definitely Montalcino. The other thing is extremely popular in the area. It's a special pig. It's called Cinta Senese. Cinta means the belt. Senese. It's a black pig with a white band around the belly, and it's called Cinta Senese. It's similar to the wild boar somehow, but not airy and ugly. It's more pretty, kind of pig with an attitude, and they're absolutely delicious. It's got a really deep flavors, wonderful creaminess on the fat, and with the Rosso di Montalcino, you just should be quite happy. Of course, in Montalcino they make Sant'Animo, which is a Cabernet variation blend, more international. I have to be honest with you, I'm not in love with it. It's wine that I can buy anywhere. I can get Paso Roble just the same. But they did it for the international people. If I'm in Montalcino, I drink Brunello or Rosso and nothing else. I'm very happy with that. And you should be too. So please, your next time you find yourself in the area of, in anywhere near Firenze or Siena, it's a trip worth making to one of the greatest wine pilgrimage in the world, which is the little village or the city top of Montalcino in Provincia di Siena. Guys, I wish you a wonderful weekend. You have a great time, and talk to you next week. Ciao.